There we go.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for coming. We're really excited you're here and can join us. We're going to be talking tonight about the Nature in the City planning grants. And hopefully we're going to give you a short presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions. My name is Kate Rensler. I'm an environmental planner for the Natural Areas Department, work on the Nature in the City program. And my coworker Rachel is here with me tonight, and we're going to be presenting for you all. So just some quick ground rules to get us started. As Rachel was just talking about, we are recording this, just to let you all know. We're going to put it on our website later so other folks can watch it if they couldn't make it tonight. During the presentation, you can keep your mics muted. We're going to take questions at the end. If you have a question as we're going along, you can put it in the chat. And again, we'll get to them at the end just to make it simpler. And so we should have time at the end to answer everyone's questions. If not, our emails will also be available and you can reach out to us later. Yeah, so let's jump in. Rachel, we can go to the next slide. So quick agenda for tonight. I'm going to give you an overview of Nature in the City, what our program is, what some of our priorities are, and talk about what planning grants are versus implementation projects and stuff like that. And then Rachel is going to finish us off with the application process and some tips for all of you when you're going through that. Next slide. So what is Nature in the City? The program's been around for about 5 years. It was created around the idea of, as our community grows larger and we have more development happening, how do we keep nature as an integral part of our community? How do we keep nature in the city? So our vision for our program is a connected open space network accessible to the entire community. And we really believe that, this vision and these ideas makes our community stronger. Next slide. So how we get towards a connected open space network, we have 3 goals that our program is working towards. We have connectivity, which is really about wildlife and providing quality habitat for wildlife and wildlife being able to move around the city. We have access, that's more for, humans and how humans connect to nature and how they can have it close to home or where they work. And then the last piece is stewardship. And so that's really, trying to move our aesthetic towards more diverse landscapes, engaging the community to get involved and play a part in all of this. So next slide. So that's kind of Nature in the City in a nutshell. So again, here tonight, we're talking about planning grants, this opportunity we have, and what our priorities are for these planning grants. So next slide. So just to make a distinction, we have this year, we're offering, well, this year as in 2021, we're offering planning grants. And then the following year will be, so 2022, we'll be offering what we call implementation grants. So you can kind of think of them as like phases in your project, where the planning grants is kind of everything that happens before you stick a shovel in the ground or, whatever your project is. And then the implementation is all the stuff after it. So it's kind of the before and then the after, if you want to think of it that way. So next slide. So planning grants, again, we're talking about planning grants. So we're talking to the before, the planning your project. Again, we're offering these in 2021, and then we'll offer them again in 2023. We kind of have this every other year cycle. These are $5,000 grants, up to $5,000. And we have them to help set up your project for success. So again, we want it to help plan your project. So that can include forming your team, figure out what your project team's gonna be. It can help you talk to your community, figure out what they want, what they're interested in, how they can get involved. It's here to help you identify challenges you might have in maintenance in the long run or getting the project off the ground. It's to help you develop a budget for your project. You can help you ID funding sources, creating a landscape plan. It's really getting your ducks in a row. So it's really trying to help you plan a project. You know, we were offering implementation grants, and we would hear from people, you know, they didn't have the skills and the money and the knowledge on how to start these up. So that's really what this is for, is to help people get all of that knowledge and work done before, to help you create a really successful project. So next slide. So what we can fund and what we can't fund, I was talking a little bit of this before the presentation started. Again, Nature in the City is funded through a capital improvements tax. This does put some limitations on what we can and can't fund. So we have to fund things that are going towards capital improvements, which are physical projects. So we're really funding more physical things. But as a base level, also, again, we're City of Fort Collins, so we can only fund things within our GMA. We have some links to that on our website. GMA is just slightly larger than our city limits. So we can fund anything inside of the city limits or inside of the GMA. We can't fund anything outside of it. We can fund contracted professionals. So if you're submitting this grant and you need assistance from a contractor, or GMA is the growth management area. Great question. So that's kind of the extent that the city plans on growing to and not outside of. The idea is to help limit urban sprawl and from cities growing into each other and things like that. So yes, so you can use the planning grant funds to fund contract professionals. So you apply for a grant, you need a landscape architect, a landscape designer, an engineer, you know, whatever you need to help do your project. You can hire a contractor and pay for their time. These funds can be used to buy supplies for outreach. So let's say you are at an HOA and you want to talk to your residents, and okay, it's weird this year with COVID, but you know, you have some sort of socially distanced, you know, event, and you have people and you come and get their feedback and their ideas on what they want to see. We can fund that kind of those supplies, you know, that you might need for that event. Can fund things like feasibility studies. So that's kind of what we can fund. We can't fund, again, things outside of the growth management area. We can't fund people, if you submit the grant, we can't fund your time that you spend working on this. And then these are, again, for larger projects. So if you're wanting to do a project in your own personal backyard or front yard, we can't fund those sort of projects. So that's kind of a rough what we can fund and what we can't fund. Next slide. So when we're looking at projects that are submitted, applications that are submitted, again, our program has these 3 goals that we talked about before, and these are what a lot of our priorities are, and we're looking to fund projects that are going to help us meet our program's priorities and goals. So again, these are improving habitat and connectivity for wildlife. So, you know, how we're going to look at that is, you know, we're going to think about how does your proposed project, so not the planning phase, but the project that you're thinking about doing, again, you don't have to have it all figured out, but is it going to enhance wildlife, or how is it going to help improve habitat or improve connectivity for wildlife? Another big piece we're going to look at is how is this project going to help connect people to nature? So what's your audience? Who's your project going to serve? Will your project be accessible to the public? How are you going to get people involved? So we're going to be thinking about those kind of questions. And then the third piece, again, is this inspiring stewardship. So it's that kind of that community engagement. How is your community going to be involved with this project? How are they going to get invested in this project? Can your project serve as a demonstration for the larger community? So those are kind of the things that we're going to be looking at and we want to get y'all thinking about. And a lot of these, you don't have to have the answer for right now. Again, this is, you know, you're in the planning phase, and you're going to find out some of the answers to these questions to the planning phase. But the more you can kind of tell us how what you're envisioning might help with these things or lead towards these things or help us meet these goals, the higher it's going to score when we're evaluating all these applications. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is Rachel. I'm gonna pass it on over to Rachel, and she's gonna go into the specifics of the application.
Great, thanks, Kate. So yeah, basically this is the transition. So some tips for applying. And here we go. So Kate mentioned the evaluation timeline. So here's our overall timeline. Hopefully you guys are all aware that our the applications are due on November 2nd. So right now we're accepting applications. Then we take the next month and a bit to evaluate the applications and make some decisions, and we'll announce our awards mid-December. So we're looking at December 15th. And then figuring that most people are going to be off on the holidays, we'll give ourselves the month of January to get all the documents, all the legal documents put together. So signing our agreements and setting up how your funds, your first set of funds to get your project started. Then you would have a year, technically till the end of 2021 to finish your project. However, as Kate alluded to, we've decided to alternate planning grants and implementation grants. So while you're dreaming it up and making your big plans this year, or make it happen and implement these projects, we would probably open that grant cycle next fall. So same timeline, but it would be specifically for implementation grants, not planning grants. So if you wanted to try to apply for implementation funds, you might want to have your plans all done up before next August, September kind of timeframe. So the basic steps to apply, and hopefully you guys have already been on our website because that's how you found out about the Zoom Q&A today. But we're going to go and hop, and we'll pause this in a minute and we'll go look at the website and kind of walk you through some of the steps. You can just see what it looks like. But steps to apply, I would say start with our website, read all about all the information you need. One of the key documents is right on the website is a PDF to our grant submission guidelines. And that will have a whole bunch of links in it that you can go to and find hopefully everything you need to apply. One of the links on that guideline is the link to open the Zoom grant portal. So that's where our application is hosted through an application called Zoom Grants. You'll go through and answer the questions, and then you'll have to upload you'll have to upload some attachments. And so we'll go over what those are going to look like. But basically, your budget's going to cover the planning phase. So what's your budget? How much money are you asking for in this grant? And kind of what your overall budget is for the planning phase. And then we'll want some pictures of the potential site that you're thinking of doing this project on. That way we've captured some before pictures. And then when we say we would like to see a draft landscape plan or sketch of ideas, this is very draft, because the idea is when you're done with this, you'd have a construction ready document to go. So for instance, your planning grants might help fund a landscape designer to create those documents for you. But we would like to kind of try to have some sort of visual of what you are envisioning. So you'll have your write-up in the questions and then some sort of visual, and we'll show you an example of that. This is when you click on the Zoom grant application, this is what it looks like. So pause with me for a second while I switch what I'm going to share with you. And hopefully you are seeing our website and not all your faces, because that's where I have my window of your faces. Okay, so you guys are seeing our Nature in the City website, right?
Yep, looks good, Rachel.
Yeah. Let me know if you're seeing something strange. So this is the landing page, the website that fcgov.com/nature in the city. Hopefully you've already found that in multiple places. A lot of these links basically take you to our next page, which is applying for a grant, where we have some basic, the timeline and whatnot. On this page, we also have, if you scroll down, our frequently asked questions. Hopefully we've covered these in our presentation tonight, but this is a great place to come for more information, and our emails should you need them. And obviously we have signing up for tonight, but we'll replace that with a recording of tonight. This is the link to the grant submission guide, which I probably should have opened as a separate tab. But so as Kate mentioned, we have a link so you can see where the growth management area is, etc. It's a 4-page document, but really steps you through everything. Hopefully answers a lot of your questions. What I wanted to do is once you've read through that, you could click this link. It takes you to the grant application portal on Zoom Grants. And if you don't have a Zoom Grant account yet, you would go ahead and create a new account right here. If you already have one, you can just log in with your existing account. And hopefully when you open it, it shows right up with 2021 Nature in the City. We often abbreviate it as NIC, Dream It Up Planning Grants. And hold on one sec, sorry. My kitties were just gonna log me in. Because I thought I could take you right through the application when I was here. Oh, preview, that's what I was gonna do. I'm gonna show you the preview. You would do the apply, but if you wanna preview your questions, you can also preview the questions right there. So when you apply, set up, make your login and sign in, this is what it'll look like. It has some very basic information like a name for your project and how much you're requesting. Again, our limit for planning grants is 5,000. And your contact information. Oh, you know what? I did that fast. What I wanted to point out, sorry, was how to navigate on the Zoom Grant platform. You can navigate using these tabs right here. It says summary, application questions, and documents. Or you can navigate with this next button. So hopefully it's fairly user-friendly and intuitive. When you get to your, see now you're on the application questions. We have, I think, some very basic instructions, kind of clarifying planning phase versus project phase. And we ask some questions about, so you've kind of have some ideas about the plans, try to envision what is the wildlife connectivity this will provide once it's completed. What is the engagement with your audience? Which audience will it serve once it's completed? So you want to tell us what you're hoping to achieve in your project. And it's 11 questions to fill out with some text. Then we have some funding questions. We don't see, we think it's great that people leverage funds. So if you've applied for a different grant, so we're asking about if you've applied for other funds from the city, that does not disqualify you at all. We see that as a good thing. It shows that you're leveraging your funds. I think for the planning level grants at $5,000, that may or may not need that, all these extra funds coming to you, but just good to clarify. And then on the documents tab or the next, this is how you would upload your documents you need. So the 3 documents, I was just going to clarify, this says download a template to the budget. So when you click on this, let's see what happens. It'll give you a little, I don't know, can you guys see that? It came up in a separate window. Okay. A little separate window came up to download a budget spreadsheet, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. So it'll download on the bottom of your screen, and you'll save that. You'll fill it out, and then you will click the upload button to save it. For site photos, you just go ahead and upload some site photos you have. And then for the concept plan, this is just template wordage. It's not a template here. This is just an example concept plan that we've put on there for you to view. I'm also going to show it to you on the PowerPoint. That's just to look at as an example. What you'll do is you'll create your own. You can scan in a hand-drawn sketch or create something that digitally and then save it as a JPEG or PDF, and then you can upload it here. And then instead of previous, it'll hopefully say submit grant because we're on the preview. We're on the preview view. And we can go back to that if we want to look at something else. I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. Okay, so you guys are seeing the PowerPoint again? Okay, great, thanks. Oops. So this is an example of the budget worksheet, what it would look like. It's pretty basic, but hopefully you can fill it in more than just hire landscape designer for 5,000. Have them break it down a little bit. You know, want to know why it will cost that much or something. Maybe it's hours. Maybe you have multiple things. You have somebody helping you do a feasibility study, whatnot, and if you have other funds you're bringing to the project. So that's what that'll look like. So here's what I really wanted to show you was the draft landscape plan or your sketch of ideas. I have one example of a hand-drawn sketch. Somebody just drew it in. Here's what I'm hoping to do. Maybe through the planning phase, you'll find out that it's going to look very different, and that's okay. This is just, we want to catch your initial ideas and thoughts. This is the example that you'll see when you're on the Zoom grants if you upload the example. And it's a screenshot of Google Maps. And then Kate made it. She added some text box and some like boxes like maybe a nature play feature would go here, or we want to put in a pollinator garden or a trail. So just go ahead, you could just take a screenshot of the area you're hoping to do your project and add some text bubbles. And that gives us an idea of helping us visualize what you're hoping to do in your project. Your landscape plan shouldn't look like this because that's hopefully one of the end products you would get after planning. And if you do end up with, if that's one of the products you're doing is a construction ready landscape plan, we will end up wanting a copy of that if you get awarded a grant and this is what you're doing. So just wanted to clarify, I didn't want anyone to be worried about what a landscape plan was. So I'm happy to go back and show you guys anything back on the website if we end up having a question. Otherwise, I think, Kate, we're ready to open it up to questions and answers. You guys can feel free to, I see one question came in on the chat, or we can take turns talking. I'm gonna leave our emails up just for a minute and answer this chat question, and then I'll stop sharing. I have a question from Denise. Does the grant have to be in a city natural area? No. In fact, you will need to have landowner permission to apply to actually construct a project on whoever's land you're going to construct it on. And while the planning phase could be a time to approach natural areas and say, I really want to do a project on a natural area, that's kind of unlikely to happen, but it could. So I don't want to stop any ideas from flowing. But one of the things you want to figure out during the planning phase, and hopefully before you plan, is do you have permission from the actual landowner to do the project? I'll go ahead and just, we can put our faces back up there, I guess.
So who do you get permission for the parks and then natural areas?
So if you wanted to do your project on a natural area or a park, you would want to, yes, talk to folks in the right departments and get that permission. Sorry.
And is there a difference between landscaping or permaculture studies?
As far as studies?
For, so you had like landscaping design. Is there a difference because permaculture is different than landscaping?
No, we have a permaculture project that fits within our project goals for increasing native habitat. That's a big focus is native habitat. We have had Nature in the City has had some past projects at schools where we did some vegetable gardening, and we're shifting to, if you want to do vegetable gardening, to also have that habitat component. So it could be paired with native habitat gardens. And from what I understand, permaculture incorporates a lot of those concepts together, I think. So
Is there a plan as far as, you know, what the native plants and animals are for the city? Has there been like a biodiversity kind of like what, you know?
Yeah, there's several documents on our website.
Okay.
They're a bit older at this point. We're working on updating that at the moment, but unfortunately it won't be updated in time for this. So if you go on the Natural Areas website, there is a PDF there that has like native plants of Fort Collins. So you should be able to find that. You
right
could
now,
probably just Google it.
there's several sources right now, and we're trying to create one condensed list. So it's turning into a big database. And
Yeah, and when we talk about native, we're talking about Colorado natives primarily.
So
Is that
we're limited to Colorado natives in favor of cultivars.
We definitely prefer the straight native to the cultivar, but not all cultivars are excluded.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the main idea behind it is we want plants that are providing resources for wildlife, and some cultivars, especially the ones that are going to make the plant look a lot flashier, they've been bred to do that at the expense of actually having like, you know, creating pollen or nectar. And so then those cultivars, you know, they're not the purpose that we want. They might look beautiful, but they're not providing resources for
Do
wildlife.
you have a list of those anywhere or no?
No, it's really, a lot of this isn't known for all of them. So it's kind of a fine line, kind of case by case. Yeah, so it's kind of complicated, which is why we generally advocate for folks to just try to go straight natives, which you do realize is more difficult because they can be harder to find at nurseries. So we definitely have cultivars in a lot of our projects. So, I mean, I guess just when you're looking at the cultivars, yeah, it's hard because you have to like do the research of like what it's enhancing.
I'll just chime in that maybe think of if you can get 70 to 80% of your plants that are straight natives, then there's a little bit more leeway, you know, or something to that effect. But we're looking at the overall big picture. And part of the
Okay.
planning process can be securing your plant list, working with a nursery to put in a plant order or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like we don't need to know for this application
Right.
what species of plants you're putting in. That level of detail we don't need to know at this point.
I heard that sometimes you have to apply for a, what's it called? There's a,
Minor amendment.
yes, there's an amendment and it costs $350 or something. I wasn't sure what that was. And how do you know if you need to do that?
So yeah, the city, it's the zoning department. They have a process called a minor amendment. And so when development goes in, you get a landscape. Usually it's the landscape that's approved. And if you're making a larger change to this landscape, so putting in a large garden, removing trees, doing things like that, then you often have to get what's called a minor amendment, which you submit a new landscape plan and it goes through a process and gets checked off to make sure it still meets all the like code and requirements of the land use code.
Okay.
So generally larger projects do need them, and you can always you know, shoot over your landscape plan or your idea to the zoning. They've got a zoner on call, so you can always check in with them to see if you need a minor amendment. And that is also something that our grant can fund. So
Okay.
both our planning grant and our implementation grants can
Oh,
fund.
I lost you. Your voice. Oh, there you go.
So yeah, so our planning grant and our implementation grant funds can fund minor amendments. So if you're, as part of your planning grant, if you get it and you get all the way to the end and you still have some money left, or you want to budget that in going through the minor amendment process at the end, we can
Okay.
fund that. Or if you don't do it in this and you then apply for an implementation grant, get that from us. You can also do that at the beginning of that process and get a minor amendment then.
And what if you apply for a grant and you get a certain amount of money? I mean, I have no idea how much to ask for. If you get too much money and you don't spend it, do you just return that, or you don't even, I guess you don't even get it? I mean, if you're billing people for services.
Yeah.
We,
So go ahead, Rachel.
we decided 50-50, right?
So we'll give you part of your funds up front. We won't give you your full funds for whatever you ask. We won't give you the full amount. We'll give you part of it up front, and then we'll have like kind of a check-in partway through. We'll have some milestones set up, and so then when you need your next chunk of money, we'll give you the next amount of funds. And the idea with that is exactly that thing that you don't
can't return money.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to return money to the city. So we try to, design it in a way that won't happen.
Okay, good. Well, and how do you know how much to ask for? What's the average amount that people are getting for these grants?
I think the ones that were funded this last year, I think most of them were around like 35,000, but it really depends on what your project is.
3,500.
Yeah, sorry, 3,500. Yeah, sorry. So it really depends on what your project is. You could get some bids before. You could ask for some quotes from
people,
landscape architects or things like that before to try to get an idea.
Okay.
Rachel, did you want to add anything?
No, and I know Wendy had a question in the chat. Are you about to speak up and say it?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Talking about, we live on the southeast side, and it's kind of a new neighborhood that has some natural spaces that need to be made nicer. But there's several areas, actually. The city's someday going to put a bike path in part of the area, which would connect, obviously. And then we have out spaces that have native grasses, but really nothing else, where we do see wild animals and stuff, hawks and stuff like that. And so I'm just wondering, like, should we apply for one grant or give several ideas of what we would want to try to do to see if one appeals to you more than another?
So we have, I would apply for one, and you could have planning for each of those different areas.
Okay.
So we actually had one this year that got a grant from us, that they kind of had this really large area, and we wanted to see them do like a larger planning effort for the whole space. So I would say apply for one, and then if you get the grant and you're planning for it, try to plan for all of those spaces at once, kind of get like a master plan, if you will, for the whole area, is what I would recommend.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there a plan to get rid of the invasive species? Because I know I'm an advocate with Herbal Gardens Wellness, so they use the indigenous seeds, which are a lot older, but there's a lot of spraying in the area that is ruining and could really destroy any projects that are implemented though, too.
Well, our department is always working on trying to get rid of invasive species, especially noxious species, which you're required by law to get rid of. So we're always working on that. We use a lot of different tools in our toolbox to work on eliminating those, and one of those is spraying. So it is something we use. I think, if you have a project area and someone's spraying near you and you're concerned about that, maybe approach them and ask them if there's another way they can do that, or why they are spraying, things like that. But we do have spraying on our properties, and we are working on trying to get rid of invasive species.
I was going to address the question in the chat about HOAs. Do HOAs usually give permission for land use on these grants? And I was going to say, yeah, they typically, every HOA and each HOA board's different, but you would want to run it by and see if you think that's something they will approve. There's a lot of HOAs who do apply for these types of projects, especially if it can help them reduce the cost of watering all the turf that HOAs are often responsible for. And that's goes right to one of our objectives of trying to change that landscape. aesthetic and stewarding the land in a different way that supports more native habitat over these Kentucky bluegrass lawns that need a lot of water and herbicide.
Yeah.
All we need to do, guys, is a bunch of buffalo poop and just kind of spread it out all over the place, and we're good. Bring back some beaver and we're good.
Yeah.
If you have a green lawn, you need to pay the city, a couple $1,000s a year for the water use. 10 times as much if you have a green lawn.
Yes.
Yeah, the natural area in our neighborhood is actually our extended detention basin. And the neighborhood didn't, and the HOA didn't know how to care for it properly. They actually weren't mowing or anything. They weren't doing anything with it. And when we got the grant that was available years ago, it enabled us to take out a lot of the invasive species. It was full of Russian olive, Siberian elm, tamarisk, and of course they keep coming back. So what we used the money for is about 2,500 was to remove a lot of those trees. And of course they still come back all the time. But it was a huge learning experience because a lot of the stuff that we thought was native wasn't native. And then, and then we got to learn about, what really wasn't native, but it was okay to be there because it still supported the wildlife, and wasn't going to take over like some of the invasive stuff. So our HOA did give us permission, and it's been a lot of fun actually, and the people really like it. And just like Wendy, there is a trail that goes through it that the city's supposed to do at some point, and people use it all the time now because they like to hear the birds as they walk through the natural area. It's a really nice experience for them. So we've been working with the city to try to get them to move on that trail because we want to make improvements around it, and that seems to be the base.
Very cool. That's a neat story.
Yeah.
So I just have another. So I heard, is there somebody at the city that comes out and can give advice? I thought there was a Stephanie person or somebody a few years ago that maybe would come out and help people or whatever in neighborhoods with design. Or is that not true?
So if part of this process, if you do get a grant, is having Nature in the City staff come out and do a site visit and kind of talking through your ideas, maybe giving some suggestions or advice on different things if you want. So we definitely have, again, if the grant moves forward, I definitely want to come out and help support those projects in your planning phase.
Got it.
And then as
yes,
far as,
it was Stephanie back.
yeah, there was.
Yeah, I thought that was just a few years back. Yeah.
Also, like, it sounds like maybe Amy's neighborhood natural area was once what we had a certified natural area program.
Yeah.
That is sort of in limbo right now, but there are a lot of there's a lot of other departments who manage similar types of little pockets of land. And so right now we're working together to try to come up with best ways to encourage people to keep that more naturalized landscape. And through that, though, folks who've had certified natural areas, we sometimes had someone from natural areas come out and give advice on managing that land, but it's generally, we don't have like an 8-point person who can go out and advise everybody. It's kind of as things have come up, if there was someone emailed a question, we try to help out everybody, but sadly we don't have like a point person who can go out and
Do you have Indigenous stewards on your team or no?
Nobody with that sort of title. We do have, when we acquire new lands, we look at the cultural resources and definitely growing the desire to understand and honor those resources more.
Right. Yeah, because I know Nancy Ray through Herbal Gardens Wellness will talk to people too and help get the native seeds. And then if you go to NAC, the Native American Culture Center at Laurie Student Center, that's always a good resource to stop by there and say, here's what I want to do. How do I do it in a good way? And, and they'll usually refer you to, an Indigenous steward or some, students that kind of know and have that knowledge base. Because I'm learning more about, what is a short grass prairie and what's supposed to be here. And there's a whole course on it.
Yeah, and in town, obviously, our ecosystems are a little bit altered.
A lot altered.
So just trying to create the habitat we can where we can, as best we can with our future conditions.
Mhm.
Yeah, wherever they're beaver, that's where there's going to be water when there's drought. And so making sure they have that habitat, because there's a beaver pair that's over on Spring Creek Path. But they're not gonna, there's too much traffic and not enough waterways right now.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions about the grant, the planning grant?
You've done a great job answering everyone's questions.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
glad to see this structure.
Mhm. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, then I think we'll be done. Again, if you have questions, you have our emails. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk more about any of this. So thanks again so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're excited to see your projects.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Uh-huh.
you.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
your interest.
Bye.
Can stop recording.
Oh, yeah.